Hello all, and this is, well, I guess this, I don't know what this is. This is me, this has been a video that I probably wanted to make for about a month. I finally just decided just to go ahead and make it. Some of you know this, some of you do not. I do have a Twitter account. I don't use it in regards to this channel too much, but I do have one just to have one. Yeah, and on it, more so than on here, I do get into discussions with people, and often I get in discussions, and because of that, I get called a ROH apologist for some reason. Well, I know why, but we'll get into that in a minute. A lot of reasons let's see, and sometimes due to the fact that, you know, I'm hard on Dragon Gate, but, you know, I have, you know, if you go back and look at the first Dragon Gate USA show that I reviewed, which was the very first show that they did, which I said was an amazing show. Then, on that video, I believe I pointed out exactly what would happen, what my problems with Dragon Gate would be if you continue Dragon Gate USA. If you continue to watch the videos I did of Dragon Gate USA, which I bought. I bought all of those pay-per-views because, you know, I could, and I bought them up until the point where my cable provider at the time stopped carrying them, and at which point I did stop reviewing them. Yeah, that you saw that I continually had problems with them. And, you know, I went to, you know, 2 years ago in Phoenix, I went to the Dragon Gate show. You know my thoughts on that. Last year I went to the Dragon Gate show. Thought it was better than the year before, though that would be very hard not to do. But I still had problems with that as well. Every time I've seen the product, it hasn't really done anything for me. And if I personally want to see the Dragon Gate guys, even if I don't want to see them live, but if I want to see them, I will watch Dragon Gate Japan. That is what I will do. And so that's what I do. I don't understand how that's being an ROH apologist by saying that if I want to see that I don't think the product that Gabe puts on is somehow being an ROH apologist when, if you go back and look, 6 months before Gabe was fired, I did a video saying that I thought something needed to happen in Ring of Honor because I thought, you know, the booking was getting stale, and that either Gabe needed someone to book with him, because I thought that there needed to be another voice in with his booking, his storytelling, all of that, or he needed to go. And that was sort of the thing. And yet, when I say that now, when I say, well, you know, and the fact that they weren't making money before Gabe left, and all of these other things, I'm still called an ROH apologist, which I find kind of odd. The fact that I don't review PWG shows, which I don't buy PWG shows, so I don't know why I would review them if I don't buy them. And the ones that I do buy, for the most part, I usually do, though I usually don't get the PWG shows until long after they've been reviewed by other people that enjoy PWG far more than I do. So why wouldn't I let them review it instead of me coming on here who never likes them as much as other people do, and is going to probably be too hard on them, and people will just come on here and say I'm just hating on PWG. Though if I truly wanted to hate on PWG, I could do a whole video on things about PWG I don't like, which have nothing to do with pro wrestling. So, or I shouldn't say nothing to do with pro wrestling, nothing to do with the in-ring product, I could say. If I really wanted to just rip and go after PWG in a mean-spirited, ugly way, I could do that, and I don't do that. So, there you go. And people can be like, what do you mean by that? But that's what I mean by that. That all said, I thought I would just come on here and be, I don't know, I don't want to say apologize for Ring of Honor saying it, because really, you know, I said when the TV deal went down that I was going to give it a year, maybe 6 months before I really went crazy. I said this before Final Battle as well, that, you know, that because I knew going in, and I guess stupid me thought that the fans that had been following Ring of Honor were smart enough to understand that. I know people are going to get upset with me saying that and being a ladies first saying that, but I really thought that people were going to be smart and realize that the Ring of Honor that people knew would not be the Ring of Honor that they got. And there's various reasons for that, because it was evident that Sinclair, when they bought that, even if they aren't in every city, they aren't in Ring of Honor's even biggest, you know, areas and all of that, that the product was going to turn into a TV-centric product. And if the numbers we hear are true, and they are getting somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million viewers every year, every week, then by all means, that's where it should be. Now, those viewers have not directly gone into house show numbers, which suck. Which that is bad for Ring of Honor not to be able to convert that. And a lot of people have made comments about that has not gone up. One of the things, though, to keep in mind, and this is not me defending Ring of Honor, but this is something to keep in mind because I think this will change very soon, is that for years, going back, as long as I can remember, as long as I followed Ring of Honor, which I guess that was 2005, right? Yeah, I think it was 2005. When I was going, you could get the tickets greatly reduced, and since Sinclair took over, really you haven't seen a lot of, massive reduction on the tickets like you saw before, which I think that's a big factor, a bigger factor than some people are saying. Not saying that totally excuses it, because it doesn't, but I think that people need to realize that you're not getting the $50% off on the tickets, or the 40%, or even the 30%. I think the most I've seen 20% off. I think I've seen like $10 off. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but I firmly believe that, but that's a big deal, because particularly when you're talking about, when people don't have a lot of money right now, and for the most part, and you're talking about, a fan base that's used to paying a certain set number for tickets, then you're telling them that now you're going to pay this number, which is a lot higher, that will affect things. And before, Ring of Honor could do that because they were selling so many DVDs. And when I'm saying before, I'm talking, probably 5 years ago. I'm not talking like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I'm talking like 5 years ago. When DVD business was really good, you could, discount the tickets and knew that you were going to make your money back on the DVD sales. That's not the case now, because the entire DVD market has gone everywhere. And since, if Ring of Honor knows they can't get the DVDs out, within, I would say 2 weeks, or within a week, I would say you probably have to do like Smart Mark does with the Chikara videos. Keep in mind, that's Smart Mark doing that. That's not Chikara, because that's what they do. That's all they do. That's what they make their money on. They're basically they're a production company. They are not a wrestling company. They are a production company. There is a difference. And getting them out within the week of the show. That way people are still hyped about the show. That way people are still wanting to see the show. That way you sell more DVDs that way. That's different. When it's, standard, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, that affects things. And then you don't have the DVD sales to, make up for the ticket sales. Well, now you're having to raise the ticket prices, and it affects things. So, and that's not me coming up with an excuse. It's just simply something I don't think people think about when they say things. And most of the time when I come off as defending Ring of Honor, it's not me defending Ring of Honor, it's me trying to bring up points that I don't think people take into account. There are things that, that I definitely think Ring of Honor needs to change. For example, Sanders has said a couple of times that he thinks that, the Ring of Honor talent is very stale, and he doesn't think the Ring of Honor is using the right talent. And I agree with that. I don't agree with him with the guys that he says, because I think that there are, I've said this before, I think Chris Masters is a guy that I think Ring of Honor should bring in. I say that, and people go, oh my god, Chris Masters, you have to be insane. But that is a different type of guy for Ring of Honor. That's a big dude. He's what, 6'6", not even 6'6", I think he's like 6'9". Big dude. You bring him in, you use him as a monster, particularly since you're talking about a bunch of guys that are, much smaller, a power type guy. And that's what you're using for. I'm not saying you bring him in and use him as a main event. I'm not saying you bring him in and you push him as, your world champion. I'm simply saying you bring him in as an attraction. You bring him in as a guy who looks different, because I think, you look at WWE, one of the things with it is no one really stands out, and the few guys that do stand out, often aren't used right. You look at TNA, I think it's the same thing. You look at Ring of Honor, I think it's the same thing. I think there is a lot of truth to the fact when people think of this, and I would say this before, you have a bunch of indie-looking guys, and you don't have anybody that looks very different. And I think that's one of the things that needs to change, because I do think you need guys who look different. That's why I've said Chris Masters before. That's how I've said Mike Knox before. If you can get Mike Knox, if he's making more money doing hunting or whatever he's doing, then so be it. But if you can bring him in, I would say bring him in. I would say, to me, he would fit more of you bring him in and he be your big guy that's a main eventer type guy. Because I'll be the first to say I don't think the roster is where it should be. I think that, if you were to ask me, and I said this before, I didn't think Davey was the guy to be the champion when the show started. I think, as I said, I think that you needed to work up. I think you needed to convince people that this was a guy who legitimately should be champion, and then give him a later date. That's why I thought they should have hired Low-Key. Dragon Gate, Gabe hired Low-Key. My hat's off for them for doing it, because that was a smart and brilliant move, because that is a guy Ring of Honor should have used. There's lots of guys like that when you are a TV product, and you have two other TV products, you have Ring of Honor, or you have TNA, and you have WWE. When they let guys go, you owe it to yourself, Ring of Honor does, to look at the talent that they go and say, can we use that guy? Would that guy be a better fit in our promotion than the guys we have now, or not? If that's the case, then you should use him. The fact that when and I've said this, Ranky King to me is a very big indictment on the last forever for TNA, because you look at the guys that are there, you look at the guys that are there that you go, why aren't these guys in TNA? I often say that, why aren't these guys in TNA? And then it dawns on me, why aren't these guys in Ring of Honor? Some of these guys, because they should be. And I'm not talking about like a Jimmy Ray, who's been in Ring of Honor, who I think I don't think fits Ring of Honor right now, but a guy like David Hart Smith, a guy like Luke Gallows, a guy, I'm trying to think of some of the other, even like a Chavo Guerrero. Maybe you don't use them as main event guys, that's not what I'm saying, but guys to fill spots. And now, if you can't afford them, if they're asking for too much money, that's one thing. But if that's not the case, then I think that's not a good thing, because particularly a guy like David Hart Smith, who is a guy I think could main event and Ring of Honor. A guy I didn't even know until this week that WWE apparently had let go of Alex Kozlov, and that's a guy who, to me, Ring of Honor should pick up like that, because I think even though he has kind of, when you see him wrestle, he's your prototypical, Ring of Honor type wrestler, but he has a unique look. He has a gimmick. He has something that he can do, and I think that's a guy they should pick up. When I look at Ring of Honor and I look at and people often, they come up with all these excuses of why they think Ring of Honor, they don't enjoy Ring of Honor, the problems they have with Ring of Honor, and to me, a lot of those problems have to do with talent. I think a lot, when you look at the fact that they say the main event scene is stale, and I agree, it is stale, and I think the reason why it's stale is because they don't have enough main eventers. They don't have enough guys that can main event, even on Ring of Honor's level. I love Eddie Edwards to death, but is he a legit, main eventer in Ring of Honor, or is he just an upper mid-card guy that can main event with the right guy? Roderick Strong a legit main eventer in Ring of Honor, or is he just kind of an upper mid-card guy that can main event with the right guy? To me, you really only have two main eventers in Ring of Honor, and that's Davey Richards, and it's only because he's been pushed that way, and Kevin Steen, and that's it. And so I think you have room for, because to me, Ring of Honor needs 5 main eventers. You need 5 main eventers to go out there so you can put on enough different main events so the main events aren't stale, so you can keep up with what the fans want as far as what their expectations with the house shows are. You don't have that. Now the question is, who do you bring in to do that? Because they're definitely not going to bring in Japanese talent. I don't even know the Japanese talent they'd be able to bring in. You still have the problem with you're not going to be able to bring in Dragon Gate guys. Noah has their own problems, so you can't bring in them. You could try to get a deal with with New Japan, but if you were going to do that, you would imagine they would have done that when New Japan ran their U.S. shows to start with. So, there we go. So you can't do that, so you're going to definitely need to bring in guys, and that's why I would say a guy like Mike Knox, who's a guy that I think you bring in, and he be your kind of Godzilla monster. And you can bring in a Chris Masters who can be not a main eventer, but a guy, maybe an upper mid-card guy who is more of your King Kong. And every twice a year you have them both go at it, and it's a big man, type of match. Bring in a guy maybe like David Hart Smith. Bring in, that makes 4. A lot of people are going to say El Generico, but, El Generico's probably going to be gone, I would imagine, till the summer, I would say. Or, in my opinion, El Generico is going to be gone until Kevin Steen wins the title, and that's when you're going to see El Generico come back, because the only guy that I think Kevin Steen can be healed against is El Generico, and I think that's kind of the way they've planned it out. I think that's, if you watch Final Battle and you think about it, I think that's the way that it really seems like they're going in that direction. But have that, you need those 5 guys, and then you need 5 guys under them, and then you need 5 guys under those 5 guys, and then you need 5 tag teams, and those need to be your core guys. We need to stop seeing the OVW, and I've heard a lot of people say this, the OVW guys. I'm fine with the OVW guys on house shows if you're simply using them to save money, but to put them on TV and then to give them competitive non-squash matches, or give them competitive squash matches on television is ridiculous. If you're going to bring them in for TV, it needs to be squash matches, and legit 5-minute squash matches. That's what it needs to be. And I don't know anybody, I think anyone that would, disagree with that is being kind of ridiculous, in my opinion. There are definitely problems with Ring of Honor. The problem that I have is often when people start talking about the problems with Ring of Honor is it's start talking about, well, they need to bring in this guy that they can't bring in. That they need to bring in this guy that they can't bring in. That they need to bring in this guy. Or they say, like I said, the main event scene is stale, but then, to me, the reason why, but then you ask them, well, what guys do they need to push? And they're like, I don't know. And to me, it's not that they don't have it's that they don't have the guys to push. But even if you were to push guys into that role, they don't fit into that role, and you need to bring guys from the outside in. And that's why I think a guy like, like I said, I'm not talking about Chris Masters, who, by the way, there's a petition somewhere, I might put it in the link if I can find it, to bring him in Ring of Honor. But I don't think he should main event. I think that if you bring him in, he's a mid-card guy. That's all he is. And you use him, as kind of a monster heel. Big, giant monster heel. But a guy like Mike Knox, or a guy like that, they definitely need main eventers, and they definitely need guys who can fit those main event roles, but they also need guys who look different. A guy like Willie Mack is a guy that I definitely think they should bring in, because he looks different. They need different looking guys. They need guys who can at least be decent in the ring, or adequate or good in the ring, and they also need guys who have distinct looks. They need something so that when people look at the show, they go, ooh, that's a different type of guy. That's not, like even in WWE where some of the guys all look alike. You have the prototypical guy that all look alike, and there's no differential. You need guys that all at least look alike, even if that don't look alike, and at least have that presence about them, even if they're not good on the mic. So there is all of that. Like I said, that's about a month, probably a month and a half worth of just me griping about various different topics. And to no one in it's pretty much in general, no one specific. I know people will think to themselves, oh, he's talking about me, but I'm really not. I've had this discussion with numerous people on Twitter over probably the last month. And again, it's not, if I come off as being, defending Ring of Honor or being the apologist, it's really not my intent, because I don't think Ring of Honor is necessarily in a really great place right now. But at the same time, I think a lot of what people are griping about and a lot of what people fixes aren't really fixes. I think that the fixes, for example, people keep blaming Jim Cornette. If you're going to blame Jim Cornette, you need to blame Delirious as well, because if you're going to blame about the match length, to me, that's not so much Jim Cornette as some of that is Delirious as well. So, you know, my opinion. So if you're going to blame Jim Cornette, I think you need to blame Delirious as well. I definitely, in my mind, I can see where they're going with a lot of angles. You know, people gripe about the MMA stuff, and I agree, it is overdone, and I'm someone that thinks more of that needs to be in pro wrestling. I think they've gone completely overboard with it. But in my opinion, the reason why they've gone overboard with it, or the reason why they're doing it to the degree that they are, is so that when we finally get Kevin Steen and Davey Richards, it'll be, you know, Davey Richards. It's going to add a different dynamic to the match. I think that's what they're going for. The problem is that that's so far down the line because of the way Ring of Honor tapes their shows, which they have to do. And ultimately, if I could magically wave my wand, and even and say, you know, I understand you can't do live shows, but you should at least, you know, tape them 2 weeks out instead of 6 weeks out. I think that would be better. Because I do think by the time you get to the 4th show, I do think the show starts to feel kind of stale, because no matter how well you try to hide it, it still comes off as like the 4th show on the same night. It does, and maybe that's just me knowing that tape that way. Maybe that's just in my mind, but I do think it comes off kind of stale that way. I think it comes off much better because, you know, by that point when you get to the 4th show, the crowd's tired, the crowd maybe is left. I think it's much better if you do like 2 shows, particularly if you go on the road and you do 2 shows. But I will say I think the Baltimore crowd has been much better, and I think them moving to Baltimore has been a big plus, and I think the shows from Baltimore have been much better. But I still don't think they're using talent right. I think they're spending too much time, oddly enough, with the wrestling, and I don't think they're spending enough time of getting guys over, giving guys segments, getting enough guys over. Like I said, I really think that, you know, Ring of Honor needs about 20-25 core guys, and those are the core guys that they really need to build the company around. And well, those are the guys they need to highlight on the shows, and then build the guys around, you know, build the show really around 5 to 7 guys, maybe the Briscoes, and then 5 singles guys. But I really think that's what's missing, in my opinion. And like I said, I really think that one of the reasons why the show feels stale, and I think why Ring of Honor really feels stale, is because, you know, you're not bringing in the talent that needs to be brought in. I don't necessarily think you need to bring in indie guy A. I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing in a WWE guy that's left WWE. I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing in a TNA guy. It's just you can't be doing like TNA did, which is we're going to bring in every guy that WWE lets go. That's you can only bring in the guys that really need to be let go, I guess. But hey, that's me. I've rambled along far enough, and I didn't even talk about CM Punk and Chris Brown once, did I? Not really.